It is 8:18 on the Morning Majority. We've been talking about Chris Matthews and his rant. He goes on and on and on about the president and what he sees as his perceived shortcomings. And it comes at the same time that we see in the Wall Street Journal an op-ed by Doug Schoen and Pat Caddell, two respected Democratic strategists and pollsters, who say that Barack Obama should step aside for the one candidate who will become, by acclamation, the nominee of the Democratic Party. They're talking about Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. Because we have all of the great thought leaders in this nation on speed dial, we were able to get Schoen to call in and be with us. Hey, Doug, how are you?
Brian, it's always my pleasure to be here.
All right, so this op-ed, you really sort of taking a stand there. You think Barack Obama should just, say, I'm sorry, I'm done, I'm walking away?
Well, I think he should dedicate the last year or so of his presidency to trying to reconcile America. I think that partisanship for the next year, given what I believe is going to be the failure of the super committee this week, is something we literally and metaphorically can't afford.
But do you see a scenario where this could really happen? And who would go to the president and say, Mr. President, it ain't going to happen, and for the good of the party and for the good of the Democratic cause, you need to step aside?
Well, I would say that the people who have the most at stake are Harry Reid and Nancy Pelosi, because given the negatives that Obama is garnering, and I thought Chris Matthews said it quite well, if we run on polarization, division, and attacks, I worry that we will have a Republican Congress, a Republican Senate, and a Republican White House. And for those of us that are still Democrats, moderate Democrats to be sure, but Democrats nonetheless, that is not a good result, and I hope the congressional leadership recognizes that as well, Brian.
But do you think it would have to be Reid or it'd have to be Pelosi or both who would go there and say, Mr. President, you've got to do that? And what do you think the response would be?
Well, I think the response is likely not to be positive, but in 1952 and 1968, I don't think people expected when those years began that Harry S. Truman and Lyndon Baines Johnson would not seek re-election, and hopefully this president will recognize that his ability to lead has been largely dissipated and recognize that there is one person, Secretary Clinton, who does have that capacity.
Let me ask you about the politics of it, Doug. Something that's always bothered Republicans and Tea Partiers is that if you criticize Barack Obama, you were called a racist. So what if you had Harry Reid and Nancy Pelosi and other top Democratic officials going to the first black president of the United States and saying, Mr. President, it's time for you to step down for the good of your party? How would that go over with African Americans? What would the political, outcome of that be for generations to come? I'm wondering.
I would say forget generations to come. If you go back, I think, to earlier this year, some of the most vituperative criticism of President Obama came from the Congressional Black Caucus. And I think that you have Democrats across the board, from those on the left to those on the center and the right, who've all been critical of the president.
But there's no way the Black Caucus would ever call for the president of the United States to not run for a second term.
No, I'm just saying that you said, will it engender racism?
Yeah.
And I'm saying that the Black Caucus has already echoed the sentiments that Reid and Pelosi would presumably deliver. It's hardly racist to repeat sentiments that have nothing to do with race and everything to do with performance.
I don't disagree with you. It has nothing to do with racism, but that's what Republicans have been called by Democrats, including Chris Matthews.
Right.
That if you disagree with the president, you are a racist.
Who claimed that the declining support among white voters for the president was based on racism?
I don't believe that for a second, Karen. I don't think you do.
No, I don't believe it, but there's no way that listen, Nancy Pelosi, when she appointed, Democrats to the super committee, had to make sure that she had a member of the Congressional Black Caucus on that super committee. There's a quota that Democrats have to reach. We all know it. No one talks about it much, but that's the fact.
Well, I don't believe in quotas. I haven't led my life that way. I certainly don't believe in criticizing white or black Americans has anything to do with race. And in this case, race was the furthest thing from Pat Caddell in my mind.
All right, now, so here's my question. Having written this rather provocative op-ed and putting it in the Wall Street Journal, are your Democratic credentials in question? Are they coming after you? Are they going to make you turn in your Democratic license to operate? I mean, what's been the reaction?
Brian, the piece argued, I think fairly compellingly, that the Democrats have a better chance to win with Secretary Clinton than they do with President Obama. that's good for the Democrats, not bad for the Democrats. Why would I have to turn in my Democratic badge because I am coming up with a strategy that will more likely win than lose? That doesn't make sense to me.
Well, I understand that, but I mean, don't you think this is not going to be received well in some quarters? You don't care.
That there will be people who disagree with it, but the motivation and the result, I think, are clear and unambiguous.
All right, before we let you go, what do you think the chances are of this actually happening?
Well, I'd say if we can come back on early next year, and if the president's poll numbers continue, as I fear they might, sinking, I think that we'll hear more and more renewed calls. Cadell and I have always been in the vanguard. We were those who came on this program and said that health care was a disaster for the Democrats. We were right then, and I suspect we're right now.
All right, Doug. Thanks for coming on such short notice.
We really appreciate it, Doug. Thanks a lot.